Welcome, everyone. This is the Fleet Week Center for Humanitarian Assistance's Senior Leadership Seminar. Welcome all to a unique, in many ways, Senior Leadership Seminar. This is a virtual seminar where we have two guests of honor, and we appreciate their attendance very much. A quick, brief summary of what the Fleet Week Center for Humanitarian Assistance is about. We started this about 10 years ago. And it's basically trying to gather military and civilian personnel so that during a catastrophic event or a humanitarian assistance event, we're able to communicate clearly and be able to communicate and operate very, very effectively. It's been quite successful in San Francisco. We broadened it out to New York, and we're probably adding a couple more cities later this year as well. So we welcome you all to this very special seminar. We evolved through tabletop exercises and a variety of other functions and medical exchange programs to cover a lot of aspects of how the military and civilian authorities can work together in an event. And we had decided in 2016 to add cyber as one of those. And I joined the organization then as the technical advisor. My name is John Payne, and I'm your initial host, and we'll introduce Michael Brown from the Defense Innovation Unit. And he will lead and introduce General Nakasone. We're very proud to have him participating in this session. And so without further ado, I'd like to be able to turn it over to Michael. And before I do, thank Zoom, who has put in yeoman effort to get this up and running for us. So without that, without any more delay, I'd like to turn it over to Michael Brown of the Defense Innovation Unit.
Thanks, John. And thank you to all working with the Fleet Week Association. This is the second year that the Defense Innovation Unit has been partnered with Fleet Week in the Senior Leader Seminar Series. So we're very pleased to be able to do that. For those of you who may not know, the Defense Innovation Unit was formed 5 years ago. We're celebrating that fifth birthday to accelerate commercial technology adoption by the U.S. military. And in that time, we've begun almost 100 projects. We've influenced about $600 million worth of defense procurement and introduced a little more than 60 first-time vendors to the Department of Defense. One of the key areas of technology, which is a Defense Department modernization priority, is cyber. So we have a cyber portfolio which is aimed at bringing some of the leading technology from U.S. cyber companies to support our efforts in DoD, and none more important than supporting U.S. Cyber Command. So recently we've brought new levels of endpoint protection and commercial threat intelligence to support our efforts there. Today we're going to be pleased to hear a little bit more about how we're defending the Department of Defense. What are some of the threats that we see in cyber that face us, and how best to defend against those threats. So we're going to start this session with a fireside chat with two guests of honor that John mentioned. And then the last 15 minutes, I'll moderate a Q&A session that we'll do with both the General and the Admiral. So let me introduce first our guest of honor, who's General Paul Nakasone. He's the commander of U.S. Cyber Command and the director of NSA. So in that dual-headed role, he reports both to the Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence. Before that, he was the commander of Army Cyber Command. He served overseas in Korea, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And I'll tell you that in my personal interactions with General Nakasone, I sleep much better at night knowing that he's the man in the job. Brings some tremendous capability and competence to that role. Joining General Nakasone will be someone he's worked with very closely, Vice Admiral T.J. White. Admiral White has commanded Fleet Cyber and the 10th Fleet. He started out as a surface war officer driving battleships, then moved into cryptology, and then focused more recently on cyber. He's been on 4 command tours, 2 of which were as a flag officer. So let me welcome both General Nakasone and Admiral White.
Hey, sir, just to sort of kick it off and set some context, one of the things I suspect that you get a lot is some coverage in the press. There's been some overnight headlines about recent events. How are you doing and how are you feeling these days?
Well, thanks for asking. As was reported on Friday, I was in the proximity of someone that later tested positive for COVID-19. Given an abundance of caution, isolating and following all the protocols from the CDC and the Department of Defense. But here's the big thing, feel great. The other thing is that wherever I go, I always have communications, always able to do the mission, and that certainly hasn't changed at all. So I appreciate the question. And I would like to really begin by saying thank you to Fleet Week Association, DIU, my good friend Mike Brown, and certainly you, Admiral. Always good to be associated with you.
Sir, thanks for that. Hey, so listen, I'm struck a little bit by the fact that you're an Army general. You're participating in a wonderful Navy event in a wonderful Navy town, San Francisco, in Fleet Week. It's great to see you here. I have very fond memories of this town. My first tour on a ship, my first scene anchor detail was actually on the con, under instruction watch, driving into San Francisco and marking time center up span on the Golden Gate Bridge. It's a wonderful town. It's beautiful. I know you and I have had a couple of occasions during our time in the process of standing up Cyber Command, and then in time since to see each other and engage, for professional matters and with friends in the Bay Area. Sir, it's been a decade since we partnered together with the stand-up on U.S. Cyber Command. And you're looking back on that, what do you think we got right? And what did you think we didn't get quite right, or where did we fall short?
Well, it's hard to believe that 10 years have passed. When we take a look at where Cybercom was and where we are today, I've often thought there were some things we really got right. I think the first thing that we got right was we knew even back in 2009, moving towards a stand-up in 2010, that this was an incredibly important domain for the Department of Defense. Now, I would share with those that have tuned in today, both Admiral White and I spent a tremendous amount of time going around the Pentagon talking about this new domain of cyberspace, providing what we called the cyber storyboard to a number of different senior leaders. I think we got it right. I think we now in 2020 realized how important it was going to be not only to our military, our economy, but everything that we do within the social media realm is so tied to what is obviously cyberspace. The other piece that we got right was partnerships. We began with this incredibly important partnership between Cyber Command and the National Security Agency. If you're going to operate in cyberspace, you have to operate with the professionals. And that's proven to be true. It's proven to be true from 2010 all the way to 2020. Conversely, no plan survives first contact. And so there were some things that I think we fell short on. The first thing that I would say is that we have to recall in 2010, we were in the nexus of a strategic environment that was all about counterterrorism. We were looking at violent extremist organizations. We were thinking about cyberspace in terms of how it was going to impact them. We're now in the era of great power competition. Our national security strategy, our national defense strategy clearly points us to this idea of great power competition. We weren't there in 2010. The other thing I would say, and looking back on it, is I think even in 2010, we would have been surprised at how fast the threats have morphed over a past decade. Whether it was in 2011 and 2012 with an adversary doing denial of service attacks against our financial industry, whether or not it was 2014 in Sony Pictures America, whether or not it was 2015 in Office of Personnel Management, the stealing of our records. I mean, it goes on and on. This has been a domain that our adversaries clearly understand. How do you operate below the level of armed conflict to have a strategic impact on us?
Okay, so it's been a very busy decade. My recollection is that you took command in the spring of 2018, and it's been pretty nonstop for you. One thing after another, the rollout, as you mentioned, the national security strategy, the small group effort in 2018, now dealing with a global pandemic. How are you building on those lessons learned over the last couple of years as we move into securing elections 2020?
Admiral, I'd even back up a couple of years, and I think it really begins with the command and the agency starting to focus on ISIS. Joint Task Force Ares was the first ability for us to kind of think about how do we get to an outcome? Not how do we write intelligence, not how do we develop capabilities, not how do we build PowerPoint slides. How do we get to an outcome that's going to impact our adversaries? What did we learn in 2017? Fundamentally, that we needed to have good intelligence. Fundamentally, we needed partnerships. Fundamentally, that we needed to be able to do things at the speed of cyber. Fast forward to 2018, very proud of the work that the Russia small group did. bringing together the best from the National Security Agency and our best from US Cyber Command, and partnering into the Russia Small Group was foundational to this idea of going after our adversaries that were trying to either create influence or try to mar our democratic processes. That's the template for where we're at today. So if you think about where we're at today with regards to elections, our pathway is set. We're going to do three things. First of all, Election Security Group, NSA, US Cyber Command, under one commander, myself, generate insights against our adversaries. We're going to know our adversaries better than they know themselves. Secondly, providing support, intelligence information support to the leads for election security, DHS and FBI, preventing interference and influence. And then finally, cybercom, acting, imposing costs outside the United States against any adversary that's going to try to interfere or influence our election. That's the blueprint, that's the timeline, that's the way forward.
Okay, sir, that's very interesting, and thanks. Related to that, though, what lessons learned are you applying to how we partner both across and within government, and then frankly, with the audience that we have dialed in today, industry and academia leaders that are focused on technology, innovation, and how to rapidly generate those solutions that look like security for everyone?
Yeah, I think you hit on the right word, and that's partnerships. What's different about 20 than 18? 2018, we were just standing up. 2020, we had stood up for 2 years. We had exercised what we needed to do. We had practices. We had really good foundational relationships with DHS and FBI. This wasn't a pickup game. This is a very, very professional effort. But that extends more broadly as well. You know, coming back to this idea of Joint Task Force Ares, we learned in Joint Task Force Ares that sometimes when you have a problem and you go to academic institutions and you present that problem, they'll come back with a number of different solutions. So today, whether or not it's Stanford, just down the road from where we're at today, or whether or not it's Clemson University, or whether or not it's University of Texas, or a number of different universities, we're working with them closely. These are universities that study influence operations, that understand adversaries, that want to communicate, that want to share their expertise. But it's also industry. It's understanding what has impact. Where do we need to look for vulnerabilities? How do we block those vulnerabilities, and how do we better understand and get after indications and warning? Simply put, it's a much broader net that we've cast in 2020. And I think, you know, to discussion today, as we talk about the partnership, we look to industry, we look to academia. It's not only those areas, it's also our international partners. It's also our interagency partners. It's a much broader whole of government, whole of nation effort.
Okay, copy that. So as we sort of talked about at the very beginning in the top line, for the last 6-7 months or so, the national security enterprise from DoD across the interagency and the nation and the world has been dealing with the pandemic, COVID-19. How has this changed the way Cyber Command works? And what is the degree of persistence that you see happening in the near term and midterm for shaping the workforce?
Yeah, hard to imagine 1 year ago at Fleet Week how different our lives are today. We have learned a tremendous amount, both at US Cyber Command and the National Security Agency, in terms of what we needed to do. It does begin with this idea of how do we ensure a safe and secure workplace for everyone that works within our confines. Masks, social distancing, personal hygiene, being able to spread out in terms of our work area is really important. It works, tried and true. Second piece is that I think we did a very, very good job of focusing on our most critical missions. We knew we couldn't do everything initially, but we had to do the most critical things, whether or not that was support to military operations, whether or not that was indications and warning, whether or not that was cyber operations that were defending our network. All of those were what we called no-fail missions. But here's the other part. We had an innovative spirit. You know, we looked to and thought about, okay, how do we provide a telework communications capability? In March of 2020, in the Department of Defense, there were roughly 20,000 teleworkers working with the DoD Chief Information Officer, working with the Defense Information System agency working with Cyber Command, we were able to grow this commercial virtual instantiation to 1 million users by June. Hey, guess what? We're not going back. In fact, as I talk to the service chiefs, as I talk to the service secretaries, one of the things that they always say is, hey, whatever we're doing, we're going to make sure that we have this capability well into the future. Text, video, chat, file sharing, that's all come to fruition. And so as we think about it, I mean, that's the future for us. It's the future for us, importantly, and it's also the future for us being able to do it securely.
Okay, got it. Hey, just recently, you and I had an opportunity to spend some time at Hopper Hall at the U.S. Naval Academy, named after Rear Admiral Grace Hopper. You know, she was a practitioner. She was a developer in her own right, highly technical, an innovator. How do we set conditions to nurture and to curate this sort of transformative leadership in government service today?
I think most people, when they consider U.S. Cyber Command or they think about NSA, the first thing they think about is really technology. They think about, wow, you guys have the best computers, or you have the best tools. But really what we have the best of is our talent. So being over to officiate your change of command at Hopper Hall, I would tell you that really impressive in terms of what the U.S. Naval Academy has been able to do. Multi-story building where they're going to have their cyber classes, where young midshipmen are going to be able to work hard problems. I mean, that's the spirit of Grace Hopper, right? The person that was the preeminent cryptologist in many ways of her generation, the person that turned the idea of a bug in a computer based upon seeing a moth in one of the computers. This is what we need. And I would tell you that I'm sure that you've thought about it. I think about it a lot in terms of how do we get the best and the brightest to come to cyber? We get the best and the brightest by having a great mission, by having great leaders, but also having great facilities. That's Hopper Hall. That's what we need to be able to do. That's clearly the pathway that the Naval Academy has set themselves forward.
Sure, copy that. You know, for anyone who's had an opportunity to spend some time at the Integrated Cyber Center on the Fort Meade campus, you know, you could simply look at that and understand that that is a world-class facility with world-class people going after hard problems. I think that focus and that intensity on being able to meet and surge in support of those hard problem solutions is probably going to be headline material for you and over the next decade or more. What do you think we should expect from and out of U.S. Cyber Command across this decade and into the next?
If I can take just a step back, because I think you hit on a really good point here, and I'd like to talk just a little bit about it. We have tremendous facilities at Fort Meade campus, no doubt. But let me talk a little bit about an innovative facility that has really paid its weight in gold for us. This is Dreamport. This is our unclassified facility in Columbia, Maryland. This is run and sponsored by the Maryland Innovation for Security Institute, a nonprofit organization that has allowed us to, well, bring in 1,000 different companies, be able to talk with 1,000 different military members, being able to generate a number of different requirements, whether or not it's zero trust, whether or not it's other tools that we're looking to defend our networks. This is a facility that people can come to, walk up, and actually do work in without the security badge, without the clearance, being able to innovate and being able to touch the broader community. I think this is part of where we see ourselves going, both on the command side and certainly on the NSA side. That's why I think elements like our commercial virtual remote capability, our CVR, our ability to telework and be able to communicate with folks is so important. That's why we're not going back. But in terms of as we look to the future, you know, what should we expect out of Cyber Command and the National Security Agency over the next 10 years? I think first of all, it begins with a broader reach to partnerships. That's why I'm so excited to be here today with a number of different industry leaders, a number of different academic leaders, really to talk about this idea of being able to work more broadly. At the agency 1 year ago, I established a cybersecurity directorate to be able to get after one of the two fundamental missions at NSA, cybersecurity. And from that, one of the things that we learned is that we have to have a broader set of partners. We have to be available to do this innovation that is being done in places like San Francisco, in Texas, in New England, and throughout the United States. So I think that the first thing you're going to see is obviously a very, very different pattern of partnerships as we go forward. Second piece is we'll continue on persistent engagement. This idea of being able to address our adversaries that are operating below the level of armed conflict, being able to enable our partners and being able to act outside the United States. Critical to what we're going to be able to do against a series of adversaries in the era of great power competition. And the last thing I think that you'll see from us is a hardened focus on the best talent. We talk a lot about setting the conditions to bring in the best talent. How do we attract a workforce of the future that comes throughout the United States that represents the demographics of our country? One of the key things that we're doing at both the agency and the command. So I think, Admiral, those are the things that I'd wrap up and talk about in terms of our next decade.
Okay, well, it sounds like you have a full plate, sir, and I think it's going to be a very fast-moving time filled with a high degree of dynamism. So you've seen a lot of change in the last decade and in your last 2 years in command. A lot of that has been on the threat landscape. You mentioned, for example, the establishment of the Cybersecurity Directive. You mentioned, for example, the implementation and the maturation of a persistent engagement modality and strategy. In the context of the threat landscape, though, what is the most significant change that you've seen in your time as both commander and director?
Interesting question. You know, as I think back, again, I kind of return to my experiences with Joint Task Force Ares. I think it begins with this idea of how much influence now is, you know, setting the pattern of what our adversaries are doing. Influence operations. Now, we saw that with violent extremist organizations in the Middle East. We saw that as JTF Ares was moving forward. Their ability to post heinous videos, or being able to proselytize, or being able to, you know, recruit a new population of followers. That's one of the things that we knew we had to get after, and we were very successful in doing that. But in an era of great power competition, influence operations spread much broader than that. It spreads to the diplomatic realm. It spreads to, obviously, the military realm. It spreads to the economic realm. I see this as being clearly one of the areas that we will continue to address for quite some time. We're focused right now on influence operations in our democratic processes. But I think that more broadly, as we go forward, we'll have a number of different adversaries that are looking at that in a spectrum that's much broader than that.
Okay, that's pretty compelling. I think that notion of influence operations, you know, I think I grew up in an era where that was not well understood by the operational force, and the impact that it can have for something that is entirely transformative, scalable, and accelerating, like cyberspace, and the technology platforms that underpin that is going to be ripe for interest for all of us to pay particular attention to. You know, sir, all of that platform, as we've talked about on a number of occasions, has come about through this combination of invention and innovation. What are you doing, or what do you think the DoD can do or should do to promote that kind of innovation that delivers results and outcomes as a trendsetter that U.S. Cyber Command and NSA have been? Granted, often quietly and silently, but nonetheless, world-class leaders in the technology space.
Well, I think Mike Brown hit it on the head, right? 5 years ago, we stood up DIU. In those days, we called it DIUX, and you know, it's morphed over 5 years. But the idea was being able to get at really good ideas that, you know, may not permeate places like Fort Meade, Maryland, or other places within our constellation. Incredibly important for us. I think the second thing is that we have to be able to get out to our academic institutions. You're well aware, the National Security Agency, over 300 centers of academic excellence that we tap into, working with the Department of Homeland Security on cybersecurity, being able to validate curriculum, being able to build that level of expertise across a number of different universities. That's huge for us. And then the other thing I would tell you is that constant interactions with what's going on with the private sector. Prior to COVID-19, that's why I spent so much time on the West Coast and in Texas and in the Northeast, being able to see what's new, being able to talk to the innovators, being able to talk to those that are thinking about such things as cybersecurity defense much differently. And how do we bring that idea back to a place like Texas or Hawaii or Georgia or Maryland. That's really what we spent some time on.
Okay, compelling. So one of the things I suspect you spend a lot of your time as well is thinking about how in the information and intelligence business you were able to make the U.S. government, the whole of U.S. government, better informed and more effective. In thinking about a whole of government approach, and in the theme of this year's Fleet Week on HADR, do you have any particular concern about resiliency efforts and cyberspace following something that looks like an HADR or a natural crisis, in the U.S. or in one of our partner nations?
One of the things I didn't talk about when I was talking about COVID-19 was just the temporal aspect of it. And I think what that taught us, for us, as we think about natural disasters, a lot of times we think in the temporal aspect of days or weeks. We're 6+ months into this. We have to figure out how we're going to operate, how we're going to do business. As we've reconstituted both our agency and our command, how do we do that safely? How do we focus on the mission? How do we have flexibility in the hours that we're working? I think that that's tremendously different as we start thinking about how we're going to be able to do that through, other such resiliency areas that may come at us. But that has been really, I think, if you're going to say, hey, what's changed in terms of your thinking? It's this idea that it's not just one day or 1 week or even 1 month. This could well be months to a year. And so I think that kind of mindset, Admiral, really has kind of changed a lot of us in terms of how we plan for the future.
Okay, copy. Sir, online we have many leaders and organizations from industry, academia, state, local government, and others that are focused on a wide range of problems. What can they do as partners to promote a better relationship with Cybercom, NSA, DoD, and the IC?
I can speak to my experiences with the election, and I would tell you that I've learned a lot just watching the work that's been ongoing with Department of Homeland Security CISA agency and the work that Chris Krebs has done to go out to the state and local levels to have those discussions, to understand broadly what the challenges and opportunities are as we put together an election over 8,000 different precincts throughout our nation. In the Department of Defense, one of the areas that I've always looked for is where are the connectors that we can get into more broadly touching the United States. And the area that I'm very familiar with is the National Guard. So being able to operate across 54 states, territories, and the District of Columbia, we focused on the Guard to be able to ensure that they have the ability to communicate, talk, provide information, in this case with regards to cyber efforts through where they're at. But you can think about this more broadly as we think about the National Guard and their ties to local community. This is a critical piece for us. And I find that, as I think about the future and I think about how do I tie more closely to, what we need to be able to do in the event in the United States, the Guard is one area that I really kind of look towards. Hey, Admiral, I would say that I'm sure that Mike has got a few questions. More than happy to take a few if he's got them out there.
I have one more. Sir, you recently got published in Foreign Affairs magazine talking a little bit about the national security strategy and the implementation of persistent engagement. In your mind, was that a sort of revolutionary approach, or was that just sort of a natural, it is now necessary that we update what must be done to be effective?
Yeah, I think it's really a little bit of both, right? This idea as we built a force that we thought was going to be, used sometime in the future, but yet we found that our adversaries were operating against us every day. That focused us to make sure that we could understand and be able to address that threat. That's what has driven this idea of being able to both enable and act. I think the other thing that has also informed us is this idea that it's amazing how powerful information can be in the hands of the user, particularly whether or not it's state and local level, whether or not it's the private sector, whether or not it's critical infrastructure. This idea of enabling has tremendous power. And it is really the other part of the scale of being able to have this persistent engagement. So again, we wrote the article in terms of being able to describe how we were getting after adversaries that, again, were operating below the level of armed conflict. But I think it has broader implications as we go to the future as well. Hey, Mike, over to you for any questions.
Thanks, General. Thanks, Admiral White, for leading us in that discussion. We got a number of questions, so I'll do my best to moderate what's coming in. One of the questions, picking up on your partnership theme, is our international partners that you mentioned. And the question is, what do you think we can learn from what some of our international partners are doing well? Israel's been mentioned because of their expertise in cyber. Estonia, because that's a country that has done so much online, maybe even more than the US has. So as you look across the world, who do you look to for lessons that we can learn?
Yeah, so certainly you've named several of them that I've been able to go out and see and determine, some of the lessons that we can take from them. I do think that there's some foundational things that countries that have been very successful in the cyber realm have been able to do. First of all, it's, when you go back and you look, they have established a really good foundation, science, engineering, that they have this technology mindset as their young people grow up. Secondly is the idea that, folks look to the ability to go between whether or not it's service to government or the private sector very easily. I think that's something we can really learn. How difficult it is today in many ways to go from working one day in a place like US Cyber Command or the NSA, going back to the private sector and then trying to come back into what you'd been doing in government work. That's not particularly easy. We've got to do better at ensuring that goes on. And then the last thing, I think this is foundational across all the different countries that I've been able to visit, whether or not it's Australia, Israel, Estonia, the UK, once they have their folks working issues, they put them on tough problems. Because this is a domain that attracts people that are excited about tough problems. Those are the three things that I think we can learn from our partners. I think those are the three things that I see that goes across all of those areas of very, very good cyber forces and very, very good cyber nations.
Before we leave talking about the international scene where we see our adversaries, wondering what your thoughts are about adversary capability. I think one of the things that struck me over the last 10 years is how far they've advanced. Now we have a number of countries out there who have pretty sophisticated cyber capabilities. Just wondering what your reflections on that would be.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that there are a number of different reasons, many of which I think all of us know. The low barriers to entry, the ubiquitous set of tools that can be purchased, the ability for many folks to do this from a number of different infrastructures, the fact that no government has the monopoly on just cyberspace operations. Those are all reasons, but it's also the reason that has led us to think about ensuring that our nation is actively involved. So we cannot stand still as our adversaries steal our intellectual property, attempt to interfere in our elections, or steal our personal identifiable information. We have to be engaged, and that was this whole idea that drove us to persistent engagement. We'd seen for 2 decades what inaction led us to. So we have to be involved in what's going on.
One of the things that's often talked about, of course, is a cultural divide between Washington and the tech community, sometimes Silicon Valley being used as the example of that. We're fortunate to have leaders like you who will spend time out in the tech community as you have. But I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that cultural divide. Do you see it? Is it something you think is getting better? What's your perspective on that? And I'm talking about companies, getting companies who will help us with the mission that we have in Cyber Command.
So I would tell you pre-COVID-19, when I was doing obviously much more travel, I saw a foundational change in terms of the relationships with the tech sector. I think that over a period of time, for us at the agency, just having released a number of cybersecurity advisories, the fact that we are now being much more upfront in terms of what we're doing in the unclassified space, I think that has been to our benefit. I would also tell you, I think that our former chairman, General Joe Dunford, was also very poignant in saying, hard for us to imagine that someone would look at one of our adversaries and see an adversary that is Orwellian in their, approach to cyber, was accumulating a tremendous amount of data and stealing our intellectual property, that any U.S. business would want to think that, that's the kind of partner that you want to be with. And I think that, over the past 6 months that we continue to see adversaries like that stick out. And so to our benefit, I think that our outreach and our discussions with the private sector have improved dramatically.
I'd certainly agree with that. We see at Defense Innovation Unit many companies that want to work with Department of Defense. So I think that gap, whatever it was probably over-reported on with Project Maven and Google, seems to be lessening, which is certainly a great trend. As you've looked at a lot of commercial partnerships, we have folks from the cyber industry on with us today. What would you say are kind of the hallmarks of a successful partnership with commercial companies as they learn to maybe improve what they're doing to be better in support of your mission?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it comes back to us being able to talk about our requirements. I think one of the things that we've learned working with DIU is the more specific in terms of our requirements are being able to identify clearly what we want with an endpoint security system or what we want with threat intelligence, critical for us being able to have a good relationship. But I think the other piece that has also helped is a better understanding of a number of companies of where our most important missions are. So as we look to the future, we talk about our network security, but really we are also very focused on our data and our weapon systems. And so as we move towards that, the understanding of the private sector and how they can be helpful in that has been, I think, very, very beneficial to us.
Are there any technology developments you're seeing in the private sector that you would highlight as being particularly interesting today?
So I probably should stay away from that just from the fact that I may give undue advantage to a company, but there's a lot of them, you bet. And you've highlighted some to us. We have obviously our scouts out there always looking for different things. But much in the same way that that private industry is looking today, whether or not it's machine learning, artificial intelligence, whether or not it's the ability to look at zero trust networks and how we're going to do these architectures in the future. Yeah, all of those things are hot issues for us at Cyber Command and NSA.
Yeah, you certainly have to say that introducing AI concepts in terms of how we do cyber, as it started out being a pretty manual field, speaking as a former cyber industry CEO, that's clearly one of the most exciting developments that I see. Let's talk about talent. How do you think about how can we better ensure that we don't have attrition among the tremendously talented folks that you train in Cyber Command and NSA? Hanging on to talent has to be a key worry.
Yeah, no doubt, Mike. As you think about it, one of the things, and I'll speak from both my role as commander and director, the services do a tremendous job in recruiting and training young people to come into either work for Cyber Command or the National Security Agency. Software developers we get, the language analysts we get, the on-net operators, all trained really well. I think the challenge that that we continue to see is, wow, the demand is so high for what's out there in terms of their opportunities. But where have we been successful in being able to stem that or staunch that loss of talent? I think there's some critical things that have helped us. One is the fact that the services for the most part have professionalized their forces. Today you can come in as a young Army soldier and look to yourself and say, I'm going to work cyber my entire career. There's a career pathway that allows you to do that. I think on the Cyber Command side, over the past 3 years particularly, the folks that have come in, being able to daily work the missions that are so important for us has been as good a retention incentive as many other things. But I think the other thing is that we have also come to the realization that we can't keep everyone, and that whether or not we're going to focus on the very, very best to make sure that we keep them that are clearly game changers in terms of their talent, or whether or not we're going to look for abilities for that force to go to the National Guard or the Reserve or serve within NSA or serve within the broader community, we're okay with that. And I think that's an important piece, because I think that this is a whole of nation issue that we've got to get after.
No question about it. One of the questions here from Samson Stevens really points to the fact that our private sector, as we look at securing all of the assets of the nation, the online assets of the nation, the private sector could be viewed as one of the weakest links. You mentioned the partnership, of course, with Chris Krebs and CISA organization at DHS. Are the thoughts that you have about how we can collectively strengthen that security of the private sector?
So a couple things come to mind. One is, now having looked at this for a couple of years as the director of NSA, I do come back to this idea of roles and responsibilities. So the idea of the role of the National Security Agency and being able to garner what our foreign adversaries are doing, being able to set the standards for cybersecurity as in our role for the national security systems, being able to take a look and ensure that our encryption, type 1 encryption, is unbeatable. Those are things that are inherently within our job. And then we look at the FBI as we take a look at their importance and what they do domestically for law enforcement, for being able to get after and to provide victim notification. Critical piece. And I think then what we've seen really under Director Krebs is just, the maturation of systems and being able to be the front door in terms of working with industry, working with government, being able to take a look at risk management in a different way. I think that that's been very, very helpful.
Yeah, I think certainly as we face more and more state actor sponsor activity, it's going to be critical that we're able to share that information with you, with FBI, with DHS. And that is an area that has progressed quite a bit over the last 5 years. So any comments you'd like to add in terms of the impact that you've seen? Maybe you've seen that make the private sector a little bit stronger. And my expectation is you're doing what you can to see what we can do to increase that sharing of information going forward.
Yes, I think, we in the Department of Defense have focused very, very hard on the defense industrial base. That we are the sector-specific agent for the DIB. I think that as we take a look at where we're having success and scale and scope, that's working with a series of private industry partners to be able to get after what we know our adversaries are doing, sharing information, understanding broadly the tradecraft that they're seeing in the United States, being able to pair that with what we might be seeing abroad. This gets back to your idea of the intelligence sharing that's so important to us. So I think that that's the partnership, particularly for the defense industrial base, that we find so important to be able to move forward on.
Here's a question from one of our officers at DIU. The organized, trained, equipped function of cybercom is unique. As I've heard, the services deliver personnel, but not the tools to the fight. How does cybercom fill that gap in terms of bringing more tools to the fight, because you're uniquely equipped to provide those in cyber?
Yeah, so I mean, a couple ways. We have a series of tool developers that we train, both military and civilian, 1-year process upon which our developers go to school on that are able to do that. Secondly, we work very, very closely with a series of commercial partners that we're able to look at and to develop and to have those discussions on the tools that we need. And the final thing is that I would tell you, and this is, I think, inherent what cybercom has been able to do, is we've set our tool developers very close to our operators all the time. And so at our mission centers, one of the things we learned early on, coming back to the learning lessons of Joint Task Force Ares, our developers, our operators sitting side by side, understanding what they need, and then the developers being able to do that in an environment within an infrastructure that's important for us.
Right. One of the things that we struggle with at the Defense Innovation Unit is how can we more, in a more agile way, scale some of the successful prototypes that we see. So in other words, when we'll prototype an effort, and sometimes we have this conversation with Cyber Command, we're not often able to have the flexible budget that maybe we'd like to be able to scale that once we see it, because for those who have not worked in the federal government space, we need to really be planning 2 years in advance, given the budget cycle, to be able to plan what we're going to be spending on. Just wondering what thoughts you might have for what we could do that would improve that flexibility that we give senior commanders such as yourself, the ability to say, hey, I see the way to do something cheaper or better, but it's going to deviate from the exact line item direction that we might have gotten from Congress a year ago.
Yeah, so very, very thankful to our overseers in Congress who have provided a number of different capabilities for us to be able to more broadly get after acquisition. The command just a little over a year ago took on a senior acquisition executive that is really part and parcel, our ability to look at a number of different ways. We didn't have that before, and so the challenge, of course, is who has the knowledge in being able to do that, and that wasn't necessarily resident, absent, a very, very lucky find. And so I think the ability that we've been able to both leverage what the Congress has given to us on acquisition side, and also the talent that we've been able to bring on the acquisition executive side has helped us a lot.
That's great. What are the things that what are the things that would occur to you that we could be doing to make your job easier, especially as you think about what the private sector could be doing?
Well, you know, I'm anxious for us to be past COVID-19, so the engagements. Virtual is great. Nothing replaces face-to-face. And so I think that that's incumbent upon us as we come out of COVID-19 to be able to reestablish those partnerships. I think secondly, one of the things that certainly will help us is, you know, as we look to the future, you know, what is it that we need in terms of our capabilities from the private sector to make us more effective, to have that competitive advantage and great power competition? What is it that we will do that our adversaries can't? And I think that's, whether it's tool development, whether or not that's, you know, cybersecurity tools that we're going to need, whether or not it's self-patching and self-healing networks, have them all in. But we're really looking for competitive advantage against near peer adversaries, and that's what we're going to need. Hey, Mike, I'm mindful of everyone's time. Do you mind if just one final thought as we wrap up today?
Love that.
So first of all, let me thank a number of folks that have reached out regarding the past 24 hours and on how everything's going. I assure you everything is fine. Communications, mission continues, you know, full speed ahead, no issues there. As I talk about mission, let me come back to our number one mission. Our number one mission at the National Security Agency and U.S. Cyber Command is a safe and secure 2020 election. We're working that very, very hard with the DHS, CISA, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Those two leaders working with us, we think, are an unbeatable team. And then finally, thank you for the partnership. If we've learned anything over the past 10 years at Cybercom, what we've learned over the past 62 years at the National Security Agency, it's all about the partners that you have. And so I thank our industry partners, our academic partners, partners like DIU that truly make us world-class. So thanks a lot for the time today. I look forward, hopefully, to joining you in person next year for Fleet Week 2021.
General Nakasone, thank you so much. You've been very generous with your time. I appreciate all your insights today. And Admiral White, thank you for your help in the discussion as well. Let me turn it back over to John Payne.
Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it very much. And thank you, General Nakasone and Admiral White. Excellent talk, excellent points. And we'll take you up on your offer. We will see you next year at San Francisco and perhaps even New York Fleet Week. So thank you very much. We'd love to get your comments on this session. I would like also to thank, before I give out the email, Zoom and the Fleet Week team. We put this together at short notice, and a lot of people worked very hard on top of all their regular jobs and overloaded tasks. So I want to thank Zoom as well. So events at fleetweeksf.org would be a great place to send your comments about how we could improve and topics for the future. We plan to expand our discussion of cyber in the context of humanitarian assistance and the liaison between civilian and military personnel for catastrophe planning and execution. So again, thank you very much for your attention. I'll ring off now. Everybody be safe and be well. Bye.